I think there's some, I don't know if it's overconfidence or confidence in yourself. And you might start to develop this over years, right? After so much experience of working at, so many companies or with so many people, and you kind of get a handle on how things sort of operate, and you start to feel, I'm speaking on behalf of myself personally, you start to feel emboldened, to like, well, I think this is how something's got to go. I think, this is how we got to spearhead this project or whatever. And if you don't agree with me, that's okay, and taking that to the limit, like, hey, if you got to fire me over this, that's fine. I can go, find a job somewhere else, even if the industry isn't like completely open or whatever. There's a stubbornness there or a pigheadedness there that it's just like, yeah, I'll figure something else out. Because I am so dead set on this is the operation, this is the structure or how things should work. A lot of times people recognize that sort of or respect that sort of, I don't know what you want to call it.
Right? It's hard to put a word on it, because
Yeah.
I mean,
Eh,
sometimes I call it personality, and because it's all too often that I feel like we get sold that bill of goods that's, if you have that piece of paper, like, or if you have that graduate degree or whatever it may be,
yeah.
that's like your ticket into these things. And like, I'm sure that there's some people now like who are up for that job competing against my wife who probably did go to grad school for like forestry or whatever the hell, but like, and they're probably just they lost to they lost out on that gig to
Yeah.
a girl with an
Yeah.
undergraduate degree in painting. This is crazy to me.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I mean, and I'm not great at selling myself, but that's an aspect too, where like there are some people that are great at, sort of convincing somebody, and you might think of this in terms of like the application process or interviewing or whatever, selling yourself to an employer. I'm an artist and I want to
Hmm.
work for you, whatever. I'm not great on that, but I recognize there are people that are and can, step other people that maybe are overqualified because they can network better or they can talk about themselves better or sell themselves better or whatever. Yeah, there's different aspects to, different variables or characteristics that people can possess. Um, yeah, I might be just one aspect.
Yeah, and luckily I feel like it's something that's learned, or that it can be learned.
Yeah, you could
um
definitely. I think that comes through experience, and by experience, I mean just like talking to other people and being involved in other projects and just socializing. Like you start to pick up these are soft science that you can absorb, right? How you talk to people, how you put yourself out there, how you sell yourself. These types of things can be learned. I'm an artist and animator out of Chicago. I graduated from a chain of art schools in 2000. So I've been working professionally since then. And then I went freelance in 2019. So I've had a pretty steady work history, and I want to step you guys through it. And if there's questions or whatever, I don't know if you want to shout them out or whatnot, but I kind of want to clip through this a little quickly so I can get to the process stuff too. But per what Tony was saying, if there's something you want me to hit on more, or Tony, don't hesitate to stop me or whatever. We can talk about anything here.
Yeah, shout out your questions if you have them, and I'll relay them to Bob, or you can come up here and ask them specifically to these speakers too.
So my first job out of school was a startup animation company called Motion Picture Studios. That was 2000, 2002. And so I'm fresh. I'm like 21 years old or whatever out of school. And the owner, it was a small team, maybe like 10 people. The owner had a contract to do some 3D animation that kind of rivaled VeggieTales. This is like a sort of biblical or Christian content. It was on DVDs and VHS, and it was called Threads, and this is one of them right here. And we did 2 volumes of that, so that's like a half hour. I think it's a half hour each. And then he lost the contract and laid us all off subsequently. But I don't do any 3D, but I did a lot of like character design and prop design for a lot of the 3D guys to model and to animate. And when we lost that contract, we were kind of trying to dig up work before they let us all go. We were trying to do independent original content. We had a website going, and I did a lot of web animation using Flash. And this is kind of an old picture screenshot of the old interface with Flash, Flash 5. So I did a lot of animated stuff like that was streaming to the web. I did concept work for other pitches. I did even some programming. We did some games on the website. I learned how to code in ActionScript, and that was kind of an interesting foray for me. So we all got laid off after that. That was our first experience out of school. A lot of us came from, School of Rhode Island College of Art and Design. Some guys from SCAD, and myself from pretty local from Chicago. We all went our separate ways. I kept in touch with a lot of those guys. Still good friends today. We were all in the trenches, in our first go round. But I filed for unemployment right after that. Was still at home. I think I was, living at home for 6 months or so. A couple of my buddies went to a new place called WMS Gaming, and they were in the city. And I knew about them. They do slot games. And I knew about them from just, you kind of know the jobs around the area when you're an artist and you're about to graduate. But I was never really interested because it was a gambling thing, and I don't gamble. I don't like to gamble. I don't like the idea of gambling. And I didn't think the artwork was that great. But a couple of my buddies did take jobs there that were laid off, and they kept in touch. And oh yeah, we should bring Bob over. He's great. He knows a lot about Flash. He can do a lot of this work. They had an Adobe pipeline. It's like perfect. I know Photoshop and no Flash. Let's do this. I just had reservations about like the content and just just gambling in general. But I went in there. I did the interview, and when I got there, it was a big company, a lot of space, a big department full of different teams. I could see all these guys working, and I could see the artwork there, and I immediately felt like I could do this better. Like I could bring value to the company here. I have a skill that would fit in here. I think I could go places, or I think I could at least work here, And that was a little surprising to me because from a distance, you're looking at the website, you're kind of researching the company and stuff. You see the artwork, and it's like, nah, I'm not feeling it. It's not great work. But when you get in there, you talk to the people, and you kind of see they're going through some changes, and they're going through some new tools and stuff. And I'm kind of like new blood. It's like, yeah, I got a lot to offer here, and you start to feel valuable in that regard. So that was pretty interesting to feel that early on. This is an example of the types of games that I did all this artwork on. This Men in Black game. This is what a gambling game is. If you haven't seen it, these reels spin by. There's buttons, and you're betting on different pay lines and stuff. All very new, all very foreign to me. There was a lot of education in this field for all of us that kind of came over. So that's the kind of stuff that I was doing there right when I started. This is a font strip. These are some early characters I did for early game. I don't really like the looks of this stuff. This is 2002, 2003 art, but I'm sharing it here as development grows. There was a lot of IPs. This is Men in Black, obviously. We had a Monopoly license, and there were some other things that came along the way. So a big learning curve there, and I was only there for a year because there was a lot of turnover at the company and a lot of producer micromanaging that really suffocated me. Even early on, I started to feel like, well, I know how development goes. Like, I know how design changes. I know how comic books and illustration and animation all work, right? You guys, you flesh out an idea, you get sign off on it, and then you take it from there. But it wasn't working like that. There was a lot of changes were coming last minute, and it's like, man, I got to rework a lot of stuff. And as a kid, I was probably a little like stubborn again. Like, it shouldn't work this way. It should be better. It should be cleaner. It should be more efficient. But after 20 years or whatever, nothing's really changed. Like, they're throwing monkey wrenches in at all times, at all parts of the pipeline, and you really have to learn to deal with it. So part of my stubbornness there actually forced me to move on, maybe for good, maybe for bad. So I left voluntarily. It was tough. I had some good buddies there, and I took a job at a company called Sock Puppet, another startup animation studio that needed Flash people. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. I got Flash down. I know it in and out. I've done a lot of animation in it already. I studied it in school. That was my tool for training animation on. I go at this other company and I accept the offer, and turns out their pipeline changed. After I accept the offer and took my seat and got my computer and everything, they're like, "Oh no, we're doing this work in After Effects," and I didn't know After Effects at all, so I was pretty nervous. But what do you do? You dig in, you start to learn something, and I have a foundation of animation, just not in the tool. So I'm applying what I know in terms of animation from Flash and just traditional work to a new tool, to After Effects. And the gig was like we got this Marvel license. Marvel was licensed with us, and we were turning a lot of their classic comic books into motion graphic comic books to sell on DVD. Like that was a big thing in the early 2000s, or a big thing they hoped. Right, they were going to turn comic books into like these animated visual DVD things. So we were breaking up panels, we're painting out parts, we're separating things, and you really learned about timing and editing, and just a lot of like, putting that stuff together on a big timeline, cutting between shots and when to fly in the audio, and you start to get into effects and stuff too, and that's where After Effects comes in. I started to learn like, oh, I can put a little shake on this, a little vibration, I can blur out the background and do a rack focus. Really good for learning on the job, I guess. I don't know much about this tool, but I know how to animate, and let's just tinker with this and kind of pick up some stuff along the way. So that's what these panels represent. That was short-lived. I think that was like a 9-month gig, and we were busting ass, straight out of school. We were doing like 12-hour days. Some guys wouldn't go home. Like, they were just cranking the stuff out. It was a sweatshop. It was tough. But after that went away, we tried to do some of our own independent stuff. I was doing some designs for this character here that was going to animate in a very limited way. We tried some children's content with these little bug characters called the Doodle Bugs. They were making pitches. The management was making pitches like, hey, can we get some money? Can we do some content here? We got a bunch of artists, right? Eventually that all kind of dried up, but the good thing about that was across the street from Sock Puppet was their mother company, their parent company, which was High Voltage Games. And that was a video game company in the burbs here that I knew about, and I knew of this relationship. So when I took the job at Sock Puppet, I did have in the back of my mind like, well, if this falls through, maybe I can get into their good graces and jump across the street to High Voltage and work for them. And I was one of the strongest candidates there at Sock Puppet, and that's exactly what happened. They wanted to bring me over to do some artwork and animation for their games. I was like, oh, okay, this is great. But I want to tell you up front, I don't do 3D, so I hope you guys have work for me as far as a concept artist or storyboards or, whatever kind of stuff you want. I just don't have a background in 3D. I went to school for it. I learned that I don't like it. So early on, we can talk about like this is part of my character. I learned where my strengths were, and I was becoming, vocal about like what I wanted out of a job or what I wanted to do at these jobs, right? So this is an example of, I did some UI work, a Billy and Mandy game from Cartoon Network. We had a lot of Cartoon Network licenses. I got to do level design here, traditional pencil and paper drawings that ended up becoming digital. Did some character designs and some of the fighting guys. Billy and Mandy was a fighting game. It was kind of like a arena fighter, maybe like a Smash Brothers or a Power Stone type game way back in the early 2000s. We had a Charlie and a Chocolate Factory game. We had a license for that. I worked on a Family Guy game. Kids Next Door was another one. Leisure Suit Larry, if you remember that weird license. Worked on a bunch of those games. Yeah, so that was fun. That was a couple years there until they let us all off again. The problem there was this company wasn't really poised to jump into the next generation of video games, into Xbox 360 era. So they didn't have the tech, they didn't have like games under their belt or licenses that they secured to go into that next generation. They ended up having to lay off a lot of people. Again, a lot of friends were let go and we parted ways. I've kept in touch with a lot of these guys. I know some of them are over at Amazon. I know one guy over at DreamWorks Animation now. Say hi to them every now and then. And that was kind of the deal there. So I didn't get laid off, but they kept me around. But I saw the writing on the wall, and that was my opportunity to be like, "Hey, WMS, I worked with you guys a few years ago. You got any openings?" My friends were still there. I knew the art director there. I'm looking to jump ship from this video game thing, go back to your casino games, and that worked out. They had an opening. I was on good terms with everybody. So I went in for an interview and kind of picked up where I left off. This is 2006 now, so like 5 years had gone by since I had started, or maybe 4 years. But this is what a slot machine game looks like from the outside. If you're not familiar, this is like a big device. You pull down the handle, the reels spin, right? That's kind of like one of the old models. There's a piece of glass artwork up here with a LED screen, and then these are physical reels that spin by, and maybe this is like printed glass artwork, whatever. But as things went on, we got 3 screens here that are all HD, and they're all, got loaded with graphics and games. You can pick your own game. So things have really come a long way between 2006 and 2019. So this is the kind of stuff I did there. I settled in there for a long time, and it was a blessing, man. Like, it was a good paying job, and there was a lot of stability because we're talking about the casino industry where there's a lot of money going through there, and teams were big, companies were big, but the art department is relatively small compared to everything else, the manufacturing, the marketing, everything else that goes into this stuff. So there's a lot of stability there, in so many words. I worked on these logos. A lot of gold, a lot of flashy logos, a lot of bright, gaudy colors, a lot of high contrast, shiny stuff. All the stuff you think you got to do to attract somebody to play your game. These are examples of logo designs, like trying to work out some logo like layouts. This is an example of UI logos or UI working out some UI designs here. Starting with this up here. Just kind of simple shapes and blocking out stuff, arranging things differently. You get a lot of feedback from a lot of different parts of the company, ultimately settling on, something like this down here, these 2 giant buttons on the sides and more buttons in between. You get to practice your gold, make a lot of stuff in gold. So these are some of the games. I worked on a Jackpot Party game, which is more like my lean. I like these cartoony things, very cartoony presence and cartoony characters that would pop up and talk to the player. But the types of games range from all over. And this is a Chinese game for a different market, where I had to render this frog a little more realistically, and really have to figure out all these numbers and all these placements. A lot of UI work in this game. There's a little fireball character down here that was really fun to animate. It's just a tiny little part of the game, but it was fun. So I guess I just picked out these 2 because they're examples of maybe some range between games here, different markets, different layouts, and there's other guys there that did a beautiful, beautiful painted work of like photorealistic stuff that I could never do. And those were some, just to explain more of the range there. So in doing this for so many years, right, I was part of a team, part of multiple teams. I moved from, when I started, I was an artist. I moved up to senior artist. And then I moved to I never wanted to be a lead artist. And I expressed that to my managers, I don't want to just manage people. I just don't want to manage time and projects. I still want to really make a lot of art. And so it took me a while to make the jump to lead artist. And I was so vocal about this that I was like, well, can we have different tracks here? Can I be maybe like this independent artist instead of an art lead? I want to be a guy that helps everybody else. I see shortcomings in other teams, and maybe I can help out, with the character design and animation on other teams, because I was already being loaned out actually. There'd be some hole in some other team somewhere. They're like, hey, we need some symbol animation. And I'd be like, yeah, I'll take it on, even if it means doubling my workload or whatever, because I want to feel valuable, and I want to make the case that hey, I can do this for other guys. And I used that to my advantage when it came time for a promotion or whatever. No, I don't want to be an art lead, but let's talk about being an independent contributor. That's what they called it. It was kind of the track that they made. And other guys felt the same way too. They're like, yeah, we don't want to just fall into this management rut where we're not doing art or anything. We're just going to meetings. So that was an opportunity to grow in a different direction. And I started helping out a lot of different teams. I became part of a team called Creative Services, where it was kind of like we would solve a lot of creative problems. We did a lot of front end development and pre-visualization, a lot of 2D work, and then help out with some specific stuff like animation or painting or whatever we were kind of good at. We were a little bit like a pool of artists that could help out the other studios, the other teams. I did that for maybe a couple of years or whatnot. Maybe got a couple incremental raises in there until I made the case where like, hey, I think we can structure the teams a little differently, and I think I can be a leader to a specific team of animators. And believe me, that was a case that I had to make. I had to put together like flow charts and reorganizational charts, like what guys can go onto what team, and here I am, the lead of this animation team, and I think these artists can help contribute because they have strong animation abilities. Everybody bought in, thankfully, the art director and a lot of the art leads, they all accepted it. They thought it was a good idea, like this pipeline where like, hey, if we need animation work, we can outsource Bob's team, right? We still got these other teams working on these different games, but if we need animation specifically, we can go to those guys. When you get buy-in from your peers, it's very easy or easier to convince management, right, that this is a good structural change in the team. That's one of the highlights of my career. Starting this studio called Golden Ram here, me and some good buddies at WMS, that's what we did. We were this animation team. We worked on characters like this Flaming Penny and this Zeus guy throwing lightning bolts. I made this Clover character that had a bunch of goofy animations for this other game, and that's the kind of stuff that we focused on. And man, it was pretty fun. And I just professionally speaking, I consider that a big achievement. That everybody understood what I was doing and understood what animation brought to the games, and supported it in the production process. In the pipeline of how these games were made. Some people did go against it just to say it wasn't all roses. Like some people fought against it because it took control out of their studio. Like, oh, these studios are making these games. Now, why do I have to relinquish control to Bob and his team for the animation, right? And I understood that. Like, that was a concern. That was a valid concern. But I just felt like this would create a better product. Look, we are animators. We can do better animation than some of your guys on your team. You don't have any animators on your team, right? So these were the cases that we were making. And, everybody's working together. So it's like, don't feel like you're losing control. Like, we're all on this together. We're all trying to make the same product, right? These games go through all sorts of milestones and checkpoints and reviews. So if anybody's got concerns, right, we're all going to be there. I'm going to be there representing my work. You're going to be there representing the team's work. So, let's all work together. And it worked out. I think it was great. We had a lot of success and several years doing that. This slide, I wanted to point out that it's not all just, cool, fun animated characters that I like to do, right? Like this is the minutia that you have to be responsible for, that you have to take this on yourself, that you are just accountable for. In this Gremlins game, like this Gremlins guy is going to swing back and forth, and we have to explain to the engineers, the programmers, like, hey, there's going to be a rotation point here at the end of the rope, and these are the coordinates, 960, -540 on an XY axis on a screen that's 1080 by 763, right? You have to figure all this kind of stuff out and plan for this swinging action and relay that. You have to communicate it to your programmers. This is another example down here, this ridiculous flow chart of how the animation starts. It goes into this loop, a bonus is triggered, and then this other animation starts. Then he can do one of two things here, then it could split off into 5 different bonuses, and those have their own animations, and there are frame counts here, and you play this frame and loop this, then jump to this frame. This stuff animators hate doing. They hate figuring this stuff out because it takes you out of what you love to do, animation, right? Like you have to create all these charts and you have to count these frames and just make sure everything is precise. and then communicate it to an engineer who knows nothing about animation. You're just giving him numbers, right? You're just giving him frames and coordinates, and you got to double check that stuff. So many times the engineers are not playing the right frames, or they don't read your flow charts or whatever. And this is like a cover your ass type of thing. Like, hey, no, go back to the chart. I figured it all out. Let's work on this. Let's figure it out. Let's get it to where, and I show them video files and stuff. I'm like, hey, it should be looking like this. So that's the kind of stuff, the grunt work type of stuff that you'd have to do as part of an animator. In addition to like spreadsheets like this, you'd have to put all your frames into an arrangement, and give that to the engineer, line them all up. It's more grunt work. Or we had an IP license, we had a Flintstones license, and their footage was so old and low res that we just had to trace over it frame by frame. And it's like, I could be doing funner stuff or more original stuff instead of sitting at my desk trying to, redraw Fred here in high res. But, you take your lumps with the cool stuff. Like I said, like I love doing all this stuff. I still think we were the best people to do some of this technical stuff because we had minds like animators. It's just not, the most glamorous stuff we'd want to be doing. Just other games. I worked on a Jetsons game. I worked on a Simpsons game. I worked on this weird, I don't want to say weird, but this beer house game. This was an original IP. I just don't have any, connection to like German beer houses and these, I forget, these beer maidens. I forget what they're called. But I also put this here because this is another technical thing where like, okay, I got the art of the girls up here and I have to pull these different beer taps to make beer fall down these real symbols and activate some feature. There's a lot of logistics there of like which arm has to grab which tap and how to do it. It's not like, I can imagine executives or management looking at this and being like, oh yeah, the girl just pulls the tap, right? There's hardly any animation there. It's not like this big action scene. There's not a lot of choreography. She's lifting an arm and pulling that, but there's a lot to figure out, how far her arm can reach. You have to plan a lot of the stuff out and what the grip is like. The grip is different on these beer taps here versus these ones here. And if she has to flip over to the other side and switch places with her, you got to figure out a way to flip the animations. There's a lot of, just logic you got to figure out. I do like solving a lot of that stuff. I think that comes with being an animator, but I don't want it to go like missed or not recognized by like upper management. Like that's what you have a team here doing. We're trying to figure this stuff out. And then I guess, I don't know why I threw this one down here. It was just kind of like a fun image I did for another goofy game where this kind of this doctor character, this kind of mad scientist character, Wild Rides. You don't often get to inject a lot of personality into the games because there's a lot of risk management. Like, oh, we want all these characters being happy and sane, right? But when you get to do kind of a crazy character or money shooting out from somewhere, like, being all fun or crazy, those are fun games for me anyway. So around 2019, this is just before COVID. I had been doing this a long time, and man, the commute downtown was really draining on me. It was like an hour one way from the suburbs to Chicago in traffic every morning and back home. It was nuts. I was doing like 2 hours in the car, right? I made a case to work remotely, and thankfully they granted it, and I got to work remotely for a little while. They gave me a big fancy laptop. I spec'd it all out. I was working from home with a Cintiq, in my living room, whatever. But we didn't have the infrastructure set up for it, right? I was forging ahead doing this. I'm like, hey, I've been here for like 15 years and I'm tired of this commute, and I think I'm valuable to the company, but I can't take it anymore. Like this commute. Can we work out something where I work remotely? This is all before COVID, before remote was even a thing. And I talked to the presidents and VPs of game development, and they saw it from my point of view. They said, sure, but we didn't have the infrastructure set up. So things like IT and networks, networking and streaming and all that stuff was rough, man. It was not working half the time, and sometimes I'd be just in a black box, and I was fine with that too, just working by myself and then like posting at the end of the day or whatever. But I couldn't connect with people as reliably as I wanted to. And then they had weird things, company-wide problems where like, we don't want you sharing files on USB drives. And I was going back and forth from work to home, and stuff would get bricked, stuff would lock me out. They don't want you sharing, information like that. Rightfully so, but they didn't have the intelligence on their network to like understand like, hey, this guy works here. He's going to be taking files home on his USB drive and bringing them to a different computer and then bringing them back. And so I was pulling my hair out. I'm like, okay, I think it's time to go. I've been with this company a long time and I love everything I've done. I've achieved a lot. I got a lot of good friends here, and it was really a tough decision to make. But I was engaged and I was talking to my wife. She had a great steady job that was paying more than me. And she supported me for a little while I left and figured out what I wanted to do in my next, leg of my career, which ended up being like freelance work. Um, and so that's where this next slide comes in. Started doing freelance around 2019, which was right around COVID time. Pretty perfect to stay at home and kind of work remotely with a lot of companies. I did a lot of logo design here, like a toy company and an animal trapping company. I worked for a company called Stern Pinball. I had a buddy there who's like, yeah, we got to bring Bob in on this project, and worked on a Foo Fighters game where I figured out the looks of all the guys in the Foo Fighters in the band, and really did a lot of animation for that game. There's like there's a HD screen here that played a lot of animation. Didn't know anything about pinball, right? But again, you get educated and you talk to these guys and you sort of carve your place out. And another big chunk of work I did freelance wise for a company called Calabash, who did a lot of stuff. They had a great contract with Warner Brothers, where Warner Brothers had a new hotel set up in Abu Dhabi, like a themed hotel, and they wanted to deck out this hotel with all their IP, all their characters from all sorts of licenses across Warner Brothers, which included Hanna-Barbera. And so they had all these jumbotrons, all these monitors in their hotel, and Calabash, this animation studio out of Chicago, was contracted to do this work, and they needed help. And so they talked to me. I knew Calabash, I knew guys there, and they said, yeah, you'd be great for this. I got to do some electricity all over Iron Giant, and one of the 3D guys did Iron Giant, but I did the electricity. And I was a director. We had to outsource all this animation work to another company out of Brazil, and I had to keep them on task with how to draw the characters, including Jerry, and this is a guy from Teen Titans, and Dino from Jetsons and Flintstones, Scooby-Doo here. This was me taking all these model sheets and figuring out how to draw these characters and relaying it to the animation team. In some cases, doing bits of animation to tell them like more like this, kind of like definitely a director role, and that was really fun. That lasted a while. There was a lot of work to do there. So I'm still kicking around projects every now and then. Freelance stuff will come my way, but it's really hard to balance with the baby. We got a toddler now, a 3-year-old, and my wife and I are trying to stay home as much as possible and raise him, ourselves, not do daycare or anything, as much as possible. So it's limiting, it's restricting in terms of how much work I can do. I did some logos for Calabash. I did some NFT projects. These are smaller projects. You guys know NFTs, that totally sank. That was a ridiculous thing. Some live action with animation. This was a Charlie Tuna commercial. Just more weird characters and logo stuff for Calabash. The Green Gobbler thing was a clog, a liquid chemical you'd pour down your drain to unclog your drain. They needed a character for that and a logo for that. So lots of odds and ends stuff that's kind of fun to do, short-term projects to kind of kick around when I have the time. But my real meat and potatoes is this animated short that I'm working on. Like, I put in time whenever I can, maybe a couple hours a week here and there. These are original characters. I'm animating them to a music video. I got it all timed out. When I left WMS in 2019, I put together the animatics. I just went to town, like, all right, I've quit my job. I got some freedom right now. I got a little money saved up. Let's just go to town on this project that I want to do. I want something to claim that I can claim as my own, that represents me, my sense of timing, my sense of character, my sense of color. Let's have at it. And I'm still chipping away at it now, like 6 years later. It's pretty crazy, but that's kind of what's keeping me busy, in addition to any like little jobs that kind of come up that I can take on. I do some gallery work. Obviously, Tony knows about that. Anytime there's like a cool gallery show, a lot of fan art and sort of pop culture type stuff. Yeah, that stuff's really fun to do. All right, so well, I wanted to show real quick. I'll step through some of this art here. If you haven't seen my site or seen my art, like this is kind of like stuff that I do, and Tony's seen a lot of this from Gallery 1988 stuff. These are all type of fan art type projects, or I don't know. This is the type of stuff that I like to do. Okay, this is my style, my sensibility. Some Akira, X-Men guys, Billy Bob from Showbiz Pizza. This is a caricature work from a skit from SNL. Another piece from Gallery 1988 of Batman. Original character, my vampire wrestler guy. Another long piece. This is Weird Al from Eat It. That was in a gallery show. Freddy Krueger. Some really heavily textured stuff here. Pac-Man, that's a new one. There's a couple Pac-Man shows going on recently, one in LA and one in New York, and Namco got a hold of me and said, hey, would you like to do something? Like, yeah, cool. And the one I want to go over today is this Sailor Moon image. I really liked how this came out, and it was very organic, and I didn't do it for anything. It was all very personal. I didn't have intentions of selling it. I didn't want to turn it into a print. It's really hard to get that out of your head. It's really hard to make genuine work because you're always thinking of your audience, even if you're not trying to sell it. So I felt like this was a more recent piece where I felt pretty genuine about it. Like, oh, this is as much me as I can squeeze out of myself now, without thinking about who's going to like it or not like it or buy it or not buy it, all that stuff. And it started watching season 1 of Sailor Moon with my wife. I'd never seen Sailor Moon. I knew of it. I grew up in the 90s and my sister watched it. I was never a magical girl, aficionado, or I don't watch a lot of that anime or anything. But my wife had grown up with it too, and she's from China. So she was like, oh yeah, we watched this all the time when we were kids. I'm like, okay, well, let's watch it again, and I really got into it. It took me back to the 90s, back to when I was a kid, and I was remembering my sister like collecting the figures and stuff, and I just loved it's traditional animation at 4:3 ratio or 3:4 ratio, and it's efficient and like it's dirty and it's not always great. It's not like the best animation. It's not overproduced like it is now, but it's still so good, like in terms of timing and pacing. You got 22 minutes to tell a story, and how it's edited together, and their efficiency and reuse, and the gags versus the action. You're trying to mix it all in. I thought it was great. It just took me back, and it inspired me to like, oh, let me do some sort of Sailor Moon piece. So in watching it, I had Procreate on my tablet. This is the first doodle I did. I just wanted to draw a Sailor Moon with long legs because all those girls have long legs. They got very elongated proportions, and that was the impetus of the idea. Something like that. And I tell you, I don't even like Procreate. I don't like drawing on the tablet. I can't be hunched over and doodle. I have to have like a nice big screen or like a Cintiq or something. Maybe I'm spoiled or whatever, but it didn't come to me naturally, also the interface and, everything I would have to relearn. So I just did enough to kick out this sketch. From there, I thought the challenge would be, how far can I push the shapes graphically and still retain the appeal of the characters? Would it be too weird or gross? What would be, how far can I go? Let's find out, right? That's kind of like the challenge. That's my mental thinking there. Let's turn this into a piece and let's see how far we can push this. Right now, I'm thinking elongated proportions. I'm thinking something very designy. I'm thinking maybe long, a lot of angles. I can see like the skirt and her legs and her bow and like some sharp triangles there, right? That's kind of the idea. That was enough to jump off of, right? So then I went to Photoshop because I just felt like, okay, I'm not doing this in Procreate. And I started to doodle out more of the characters, the other girls, and trying to, repeat that idea, right? Okay, these long legs and these triangles all over. And I think I did maybe 2 or 3 doodles that looked like this, and they were all kind of like the same. So it made me feel like, yeah, this is the direction I want to go, right? It felt right. And when I had a couple characters here, all kind of together, basically in these early stages, I'm trying to get buy-in for myself. Like I feel like I can take this to a complete state, and I feel confident in this direction, even though these are the crudest drawings, right? And I think that's the hardest thing for me to explain in any of the process stuff. Is so much comes from experience, where like you might see other people like really work up a drawing or a painting, and you can kind of see it take form over multiple stages. I think there's a lot of me knowing my strengths and weaknesses and my limits, and through experience, just like, okay, I can jump in from here, right? I got a couple stick figures, and it's not going to look anything like this, but I can take it from here. Let's go to town. Let's just start doing final shapes, final lines. I'm not roughing out a whole lot here. The design is obviously simpler and maybe allows for it, but I think through experience you kind of like learn where you can kind of like what you can get away with, or what you can kind of see through to the end, or it's something very innate, and or something that you learn over time, and it's really hard to express into words and any kind of visuals. Um, Anyway, the next step was sketching out the girls in Photoshop, hoping that a group comp with all those triangles and legs will still work when it'll all come together. One thing I liked about the show is the cast of characters and the girls' different personalities, and that was another goal. Was like, how can I show some of the girls' personalities in each of these still poses, right? So that was another goal. Moving forward, right, we got their hourglass figures, harsh triangles, and their legs being these long, elongated triangles too. Hard edges, zigzaggy shapes all over, even in the negative space. I was wondering if I could keep their chins sharp. Like, I got her chin here really sharp. Was that something that I could get away with, or would that look a little weird? I talk about shape language. You talk about shape language and animation, and like sharp angles, sharp corners, sharp eyebrows, a long pointy nose, sharp long fingers. That all means villain, right? That's kind of like shorthand for bad guys. And here we don't have bad guys, we got girls. So could I get away with that here? Can I still do all these angles and maybe even like a sharp chin or whatever, sharp facial features, and still get away with it and still keep the appeal, have it still feel like Sailor Moon? I think, these are the types of questions that come up in my mind, that I'm posing challenges to myself, like, what can I get away with? I'm pretty confident in my style, in how I work, execution, but there are things like theme and appeal that, like, I can keep pushing, and try for some more extreme things, and experiment with. I have a note down here that I'm not talking about. I'm not thinking about volume or anatomy. Again, I'm not roughing this out like, oh, here's a ball for a head and bisect it, and a character is 6 heads tall, and the volume, of their torso, and, all that stuff, which is all very good fundamentals, right? Artists develop in different ways, and everybody's got their own style, and I'm approaching this in a very flat and sort of designy look here, I guess. I'm talking a little bit to that point, I'm still trying to ground some things, and I'm still thinking of the character's weight and how their weight is on one hip or on one leg. So I'm trying to illustrate here with these lines like, yeah, this is your hips, these are their skirts, and they have one straight leg that's supporting their weight, and then their hips are cocked to one side. So even though, this is all cartoony or graphic-y, designy stuff, I'm still trying to anchor some elements of reality into it, thinking of some things. And it's hard to say where those lines are. Like, how much do you mix reality versus graphic design? And, I think you just got to feel it out. I think you just got to do it. I'm pointing out that Mars here, Sailor Mars, she's more confident. She's got one fist up, one hand on her hip. And so she's got more of a sturdy stance. She's more stable, while these other girls are cocked to one side or have their weight on one leg, maybe in a more cutesy pose. So I'm still thinking about.
Really quick, Bob.
Sure.
Is the answer to or is at least part of the answer to the questions that you're having as you're making this stuff, Is does the answer lie anywhere in the fact that you've done pieces like this before? Like, am I wrong to say that the is it something Soho? What was that? That
Yeah, Soho, Last Night in Soho, right?
Last Night in Soho. Did that come before the Sailor Moon piece?
That I don't know.
Because
I
you
know I
know
did.
that,
I know
yeah.
I did that for the movie premiere, but they could have been around the same time, or they could have fed off, one off of the other, if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, because that's a part of what I wonder. It's like, does the answer to those questions of like, elongated limbs,
Hmm.
super vertical comps,
Hmm.
um, does the answer lie within the fact that that's already based on a decision you've made in the past? Like, do you feel more comfortable doing that because there's a through line there with pieces that you've done prior?
Yeah, I think in terms of like the format, a lot of times, like for the gallery stuff, I like the vertical format because I'm printing these out myself, and I can get two off of a piece of paper. And I think I have an Evil Dead image that's really, really vertical too, where he's got elongated features or limbs. And so the format is dictating that a little bit too, and it depends on, you know, I am thinking of this as I wasn't thinking of Sailor Moon as a print, and I don't think I
Mm,
ever offered it as a print. But I did have a lot of that experience behind me doing vertical prints and elongated characters. So that could very well come up, like, oh yeah, this is something I'm familiar with and something I
mhm.
enjoy doing or something I do well or whatever. Um,
Yeah, because I think that there's like comfort in when you're having that dialogue with yourself, knowing that this is something that worked out for me in the past as well.
mm,
And
yeah,
I do think that like everything you're saying right now is so important because this is something I talked to my intro class about is to try their best to have a dialogue with themselves while they're in the preliminary stages and
mm,
asking themselves these types of questions that you're asking. I think
yeah,
one of them being the most important of how much of the fundamentals do you bring into this, or as I refer to like foundations principles,
hmm,
and then how much of that is skewed, like where are you wanting to do that, and being conscious about that rather than just like going through the motions of the repetitiveness that you're used to, but
yeah,
actually asking yourself these questions that require you to think critically.
yeah,
So I just wanted to re-emphasize that for the group, and that
yeah.
it's so cool to see somebody actually doing that in the preliminary stages who is also
Yeah,
a
it's
professional.
it's I love trying to figure that stuff out. I love trying to capture that because, like you're saying, it's really hard to verbalize it. It's really hard to ask yourself those questions. But when I do a piece, any piece, I'm always saving multiple Photoshop files, and I can go through those and look at like, oh, here's the progression here, and it forces me to think back on those moments. Like, oh yeah, this is what I was thinking about there, and I took a break and I saved the file. Or oh yeah, I could see the change from version 5 to version 6, and this is what I can remember thinking about those things, rather than just having one file and looking at a finished piece at the end and not remembering the process, or the process, but you don't have those milestones to trigger what you were thinking about in the moment. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
um, I have a note here. For me, a lot of the illustration process is exploratory and feeling confident. I don't necessarily work out the complete idea. I'd rather let it take form whenever possible, but I do need to feel good about the direction. I think that's where I'm kind of getting back into like personal stuff, and to your point too, it's like, yeah, some of this is stuff that I've done before or stuff that I feel confident in terms of how I'm going to execute these characters because of these flat designs and stuff. And I just need to I just need to feel good about the idea, feel confident in sort of that mental direction, and take it from there. I don't work out a complete idea. I know a lot of guys, they'll do color comps, they'll do compositional layouts and stuff, and I think I'm doing that all in real time. Like I think I'm, working through that stuff, and I don't think there's a wrong or right way to do things. And it depends on the piece. Certainly, if I'm doing something maybe more significant or for a client or something, I'm going to go through those iterations a little bit more just to feel better about it myself, but also to share it with them. Like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and these are some of these variations, whatever. But with these stuff, with Sailor Moon or some of these images, It's like, yeah, I'm falling back onto what I know, what I'm confident in, and sort of that experience that I already have. And maybe that's like redundant in some way, or maybe that's like safe. But I do stress that I'm trying to challenge myself in other ways, like the characterization or the theme or something graphically about it. I'm still trying to push myself in different directions. Like with that Ninja Turtles piece, I felt like I had a lot of characters in that piece, including a mob of foot soldiers back there. And I wanted everything to read clearly and stuff. And I felt like that was another piece where like that was the challenge there, right? And I'd like to do something like that again because I don't do that many characters that often.
Yeah, your busy comps are some of my favorites. I covet that Ninja Turtles piece that I have from you,
Oh yeah.
as well as that Ghostbusters piece, which was, for those of you who don't know how I met Bob, I was in a Ghostbusters art book with him, and I didn't know who he was, but I saw his Ghostbusters piece, and I was like, this is incredible. And so that's kind of just how I found him. And
Yeah.
I would say that, like you said, that it might sound safe, but I don't know that that's exactly, I don't know that I would call it that, because you're working with shape language that has proven to work, like for you. And so I don't know that that's you staying safe, but more so just like giving the audience what they expect from you, what they want from you, as well as doing what you enjoy. Like, I feel like it's safe, if you want to say safe, if you're not already successful. Like, you're already like ensconced in your field, you're already established. Like, I think it's just a matter of like draw and create work in the way that is exciting for you, and in the way that your fans like me are like, oh shoot, that's a new Bob Rissetto piece.
There's
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this thing that I struggle with all the time, and it's this line between commercial art and fine art, and and we did that book together, right? Where we're talking about childhood drawings, right? We did all that stuff, and that was an effort to like really just try to get back to that time where you're just doing art for yourself and you're not thinking about anything. You're not thinking about the criticism of anyone. You don't have an audience in mind. You don't have a demographic. You're not trying to sell this or whatever. For the life of me, I don't think there's a good way of purging that from your mind. You're always kind of thinking about that. And so that's what I mean when I say safe too. It's like, oh, I've done this before. That's safe. I know it's worked for an audience, where the other half of me is like, well, a real artist is always experimenting, always learning, right? They're always trying for something new. And so that's not to say there's real and fake artists or anything, but there's a healthy mix of both. And I'm kind of always trying to challenge myself in that regard. Like, man, I wish I could be so bold, or I wish I could be so experimental in that everything I do is different, right? And I don't know. I've had some successes with that within sort of my flat design style, or whatever you might want to call it, my safe style.
It's so funny because it's also like, not to get even deeper into that concept, but I mean, if you were to like zoom out a little bit, or a lot, you would probably see an all-encompassing Bob Rissetto in like a piece-by-piece way. And I feel like one of the ways that you could see that is through these PowerPoints where you're showing us these different compartments of your career. And even just from what you've shown us, I've already seen like several different periods of Bob Rissetto, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you might be sitting here thinking like, oh, this is safe or something, where in the grand scheme of things, it's like, who knows where you're going to go in 2 to 3, 5 years.
Yeah.
Go somewhere completely different. And then through the lens of somebody who's identifying you via an art history lens, you might come off as somebody who experimented quite a bit, even though right now it seems like you're not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know. I think about that too, man. And I'm 47 years old, I think, and I want everything that I've done like cataloged for that reason. Like as egomaniacal as that might sound or whatever, it's like I want to be able to look back on that, and I want other generations to sort of look back on that, like this was a person and this is how he was thinking at these times, in terms of visualization.
And I think they will, even if it doesn't seem like it in the moment, you know?
Yeah. Moving on. I guess I'm getting into the background here a little bit. Oh, here I mentioned I've done long vertical prints in the past, and I thought that the elongated characters would work well in such a format, even helping to exaggerate the design. So I blocked out vertical area that represented my canvas. I'm just talking about like shaving it down a little bit, thinking about a print now and just enjoying that format. Each of the girls were on separate layers in Photoshop as smart objects that I could scale and move around and transform. I guess at this stage, they're not smart objects yet. They're just in separate layers, and I could, chop off an arm or a leg and just scribble it back in there, work out this composition. So we're going from this just to line up these girls like, okay, how am I going to make this into a more vertical format and a composition that I feel good about and have experience with. And that's what this is kind of resulting in. I did change Venus's pose. That informed me, like, okay, I can't have just this other arm down pose here with this girl in orange. She's right here, Venus. I couldn't use that same pose again. I needed to, make use of the space, and so she's got one arm up and another arm across. These are very broad strokes still, obviously. These are just stick people. But that's what I am thinking about. I started thinking about the background, trying to exaggerate the vertical design still with these long lines, kind of like these bolts of color coming in. Got the cat in there, Luna. And I was trying to think like color-wise, I started thinking like, I want the girls to be big, bold, primary colored. And then these background bolts are probably going to have to be like desaturated or almost pastel color. That's why they kind of look like this. Because I'm already planning that there's going to be some very bold, contrasty colors in the girls here. Just early thoughts here, and starting to try to see it in my mind's eye, even though there's no color in these girls here. I think that's about all here. So this is probably the most significant jump here, but this is kind of where I'm talking about like, okay, I got a composition here. I got the 5 girls here. I got an idea for the background. I'm just going to go right in and start making shapes now on the first girl, Sailor Moon. Just start to hammer that out. Get one girl looking good, like how I want, sort of design-wise and shape language-wise. And I'll just, trickle that down to the other girls and just start to work on a composition that works. And so that's what this represents. I got Sailor Moon in here. I know it's kind of hard to see some of this because it's all blue colors. But that is how I work. Like I'm really just focused on shapes. And I take any kind of crazy color to start with and just blocking these shapes. I'm just looking at these long sticks. I'm looking at, okay, there's a mass here and there's, this kind of contrast, right? There's a lot of stuff going on here, and there's going to be 2 more characters here. Then these long legs. Is this going to be working? Is this working to my liking, right? And there's not going to be a lot of color in here. They're all going to be like flesh-colored legs and maybe some boots or whatever. Is this going to play out well, or is it going to look awkward? And I'm constantly trying to get myself I'm trying to approve it myself. I want to feel good about everything moving forward. I think around this time, let me see what I say here in yellow. A lot of my process is just a hunch, just a feeling that I'll work it all out in the end. The only way I know how to teach that is to build confidence and just do it. Gain experience and keep making stuff. You'll get to feel for your own strengths and simply what you enjoy doing the most. So yeah, I think that's kind of the whole summary with this whole PowerPoint here, really. Finalizing the shapes, I turn the characters into smart objects at this point, and I can work inside of each smart object. This is where we're getting a little technical. Here's Sailor Moon's smart object, this yellow layer, and inside you can see all the different things, triangles and different masks, and her arm and hand and elbow, and they're all on separate layers. I'll rotate stuff and squeeze stuff and repaint stuff and just try to feel out what feels right, just in terms of everything, appeal, graphic design, balance, negative shapes, sort of all that graphic design sort of fundamental stuff. This stage can look strange because I often use crazy colors to help focus exclusively on shapes. My eye is looking for, I'm looking for tapers and tangents and general appeal without thinking about color at all. Just a simple inking brush with an imperfect edge. I'm doing all this stuff with like some brush that's got a wonky edge. I'll zoom in at the end and you can kind of see. And that helps me keep things imperfect and kind of maintains my sanity because this stuff looks like it could be vectors, right? I could be plotting these points in Illustrator or Photoshop, but I still want a hand-drawn touch. I'm still drawing this with sweeping strokes, in Photoshop. And there's a craggy sort of little edge to it, and I might shave a little bit, but it's so imperfect that I don't have to focus on like, man, I'm trying to get this straight, or I'm trying to shave off these pixels here off an elbow, or I want that chin to be a little bit more like whatever. It's all kind of rough. The line quality is a little rough, and I feel like that buys me some sanity, and it buys me some look of imperfection and a look of handcrafted quality. I don't want anything looking too cold or mechanical. I think that's about it. Piling on layers here. Yeah, I use that ink brush. I guess I detail it here a little bit more. I'm talking about Mars specifically. I got her foot, her top, her skirt, her foot, her hand, and they all have like their own clipping masks. So like, her foot is just a tiny little triangle, and then I got a clipping mask on it. Like, okay, let me paint the detail of her shoe on that triangle, or let me paint the stripes in her skirt on the skirt triangle, or whatever, right? So everything is kind of like a mask, or at least that's one way I like to work, where I've blocked out these shapes. I got them all on separate layers, and now I can add color and detail and or texture on top of it with all these different clipping masks. That's kind of how this is all set up here. I mentioned color is a very separate shift of my brain when the time comes, which isn't too different than any sort of other traditional illustration. I think most illustration, right, you're thinking of line first. I'm thinking of comic books mainly, where you're trying to capture forms and composition, and you're only doing that with line. And there's a quality to the line, and you think about the inking and the thicks and thins and whatever contrast you want to bring to the line. And then you move into the color, and what does the color bring, and what values are you going to emphasize? And, it's kind of like, I see it as two different trains of thought, even though you might have the vision for it at the early stages. So I'm just about getting to that stage here. I've kind of got things blocked out. I don't think there's much changes here. No, I'm just kind of detailing the process. Oh, I guess around this stage too, I'm talking about adjusting Jupiter's height. She's the tallest girl of the group, so I kind of want to make sure she looks the tallest. And I got Venus in there, I got Mercury in there. She's got no head, no face yet. And it's a little bothersome at this point that her head is a little long. I kind of notated that here. I got these other girls with maybe their ball-shaped heads. And that felt a little odd to me. It also feels a little odd to me that her arm is across and being obscured by Jupiter's head. And this is another thing where it's really hard to understand, why I feel this way. You're always thinking about clarity and silhouette, and you want that stuff to be clear. So that's very easy to say in this case. Like, I can't tell what her hand is doing, or, we might lose her arm across her body here. But in the same vein, I feel like we're not seeing Mercury's hands over here, this girl here. Her hands are being obscured. And I think that's okay. And I think that's okay because I get the gist of her pose. I understand she's kind of going for this coy pose with maybe her hands clasped down here that are just out of view. But I can't tell you exactly what's happening with Venus here. I know she's striking some sort of finger pose here, and her arm is crossing, but you got another arm up. So that's where I say it's like, the rules aren't set. There aren't hard rules here. Like, I just felt weird about this, and I knew I had to correct some stuff about Venus versus maybe some of the other girls and the placement of other things. I have here highlighted. I rely on how things feel to me more than anything, and I think that's something I even stress to my wife often. Like, we could be playing a video game, and I'm telling her, like, I'm playing this based on how I feel, right? Like, I'm fighting this character, and she's watching, and she's got an analytical brain that's like, oh, you got to do this, or the character's doing this or that, so you have to dodge, or this is when you have to attack. And I don't see it like that. I see it like how I feel, right? I'm playing the character. I'm over and over. I'm learning, and but I don't analyze what's happening. And I think that's unusual, specifically for an animator. because I'm trained to look at frames and animation and the timing, and I look at that stuff so closely. But when I'm making art or even playing a video game, and this is part of my personality, I'm relying more on how I feel about something, right? Which can be dangerous in a lot of situations too. But that's what I'm trying to communicate here with stuff like this. Like what feels right. This feels right to me, but Venus didn't feel right. I'm gonna have to make some fixes on that. And so here I did make it fixed a little bit. Like I scooted her over. I changed the shape of her head a little bit. Her hand is still getting lost within the silhouette, so that's kind of like a no-no for me. But I got her arm away from Jupiter's head, so I guess I fixed it a little bit. But I'll make another adjustment to her later. I'm getting those colors dropped in, and those colors, like you can kind of see in here, I might have like a layer style, a color overlay, and that's how I change the colors. I just paste a color overlay onto the actual layer, and I start to see what all those colors look like together, right? So I can grab all the legs, or I can grab all the parts that are skin and just paste like this flesh color on all those parts. Or paste anything that's red. I want to share the same red of her bow, as her boots, as these red things in her hair, as her elbow pads. Boom, copy and paste that layer style, and they're all red. And now I have to look at it critically and be like, okay, is that the right red? Is that too saturated? Not enough saturated? You know, how is that looking? And my goal in all of this is to get her feeling right. Sailor Moon is like the key figure. So these blues and these reds, once they felt right, and I think they felt right to me here, then I key that to the other characters. Like the green in Sailor Jupiter here, or the red in Sailor Mars, is going to be of the same value as Sailor Moon, just so they're all sort of harmonized, right? This orange in her skirt is probably the same value as the blue in her skirt, just different colors. And so I'm working off of one character and feeling good about the colors in one character, and that's kind of the process there. I'm just copying and pasting colors, and I can go into those overlay channels and just play with the dials and sliders and pick any color I want, and just see how that feels. Like, oh, should the hair be a little more golden? Should the line work be a different color or whatever? Speaking of Venus, I adjusted her head. Her line of action is pretty straight with her head up against her arm. Yeah, that's feeling better. I positioned her hand in front of her body to untangle it from Jupiter's hair. But I knew there would be a problem. I knew this would be a problem even as I drew it, because it makes her silhouette weaker. Yeah, her arm is in her body, and that makes her a weaker silhouette. And sometimes you just do things because you want to see what you can get away with. I think that's a good point worth noting, right? Like I kind of knew that going into it. And it's just like this angel and devil type thing, where it's like, go ahead and try that. Go ahead. If you think you're so brave, go ahead and put that arm inside of the silhouette and watch it get lost, right? And that's exactly what happened. And I just had to do it and get it out of my system. And I'm going to find another pose in the next slide. I changed Sailor Moon's eyes to be the more classic upside down U shape. You can see here they were kind of straighter. And sometime around this point, her jaw is a little bit longer here. I lost that sharp, pointy jaw thing that I was trying for. I think I just had enough angles everywhere else, and I didn't need to emphasize it in her chin. And things come and go. That's the whole point of doing this. What feels right. I tried it, and it didn't feel comfortable in the end. Anything else change? Yeah, you can see the difference here in Venus. The shape of her head and maybe her pose a little bit. Got her hair back in there, which really encompasses her silhouette even more. Makes it more difficult to read. All these stick legs are mashing together with their flesh colors, and if I made Mars's legs flesh, it would look like Sailor Moon had 3 legs here too, which I knew was going to be a problem. So going forward, right, I at least get all the colors nailed down. Got all the characters with their colors, and feeling good about expressions and poses. Here you can see I finally changed Venus and got another arm fist up pose, and so strengthening her silhouette back here. I scaled everybody down a little bit so that I got some room where she wasn't getting choked up here at the top. It got some breathing room, and I'm really starting to flesh out the background here. Got completely away from those triangle bolts, and this is largely too because I'm watching the show in sync with me creating this. And Sailor Moon was a character, Tuxedo Mask, this guy back here in silhouette, was a character that came into the show, and I just felt like, oh yeah, I got to integrate him. That would be great. He was the main character, and I think they even added him into the intro. I think I'm not sure because he wasn't always there. But I was like, okay, well, we got to represent that character, and that's a perfect sort of background choice. I'm kind of leveraging the intro here, where he's this masked, mysterious character, all in black, and the sky is kind of coming through in his cape. And I echoed that. I was like, oh, that's a great thing that I can kind of throw in the back here. Have this shape that adds a lot of contrast, and also it keeps his character in mystery. These um these wonderful bubble shapes. I love all the stuff in like 80s, 90s anime. These very frosted sort of bubbles, and I kind of threw those back there as part of the look too. I think the main thing here with seeing all the girls in color, I'm really starting to see. I wish I could have turned this layer off back here with like these purpley strokes. It all just mashes together. It's all just colors that kind of like get lost. It's all the same value. I knew that going into it, and my immediate solution was let's throw some kind of shadow back there, some painted darker shapes, and it pops Sailor Moon off, but I felt like this is really kind of dirty and dingy, and yeah, I wasn't liking how it looked. Um, I think it's like a multiplied channel that's kind of like a purple color. I remember thinking about this problem. I remember taking a break and thinking about like how I'm going to solve this. I want to keep the colors bright. I want to keep colors prominent. I don't want to have to result in this kind of darker, desaturated or colors. So I remember thinking about this problem throughout the evening and during dinner, and I remember wanting to fight back with more color. Like this is chaos theory. Can I separate an already oversaturated, overcolored image with more color? Can I work myself out of this problem in some way? I think those are the conversations that we're talking about that you can kind of pay attention to or try to have with yourself or challenge yourself with. And my solution at first was to like, all right, let's try some different colored shadows here on some of the girls to make different limbs pop off, and so all these skins didn't blur together. And I'm trying to fight it with more color. I'm like, okay, let's go crazy. We got green shadows here, we got yellow shadows on you, we got pink shadows on you. I was trying it with these three characters, and I'm just trying to look at those three characters and just can I make sense visually? If I'm looking at it, can I see these separate characters, or does it just look like a mash of pop color? And I still felt like there was some solutions there that need to happen, some separation that's got to come through. But that was my first attempt. I'm trying to do some crazy shadows, and I still have some sort of darkened value here behind her, and it was okay. It was maybe a step in the right direction, but I still wanted more color. I was trying to have some abstract fun with those shadow shapes and the colors. Trying to push elements for something more unique. The shadows themselves are simply layers that are clipped to the individual girls, in a multiply mode. And I will say it was pretty fun just getting a brush with some of this texture and just doing these sweepy strokes across here just to hit some areas. And that was feeling good. That was feeling right. Like it wasn't coming together quite yet, but it felt right in terms of process or terms of execution. Yeah, you can see there's no real basis of like where the light is and where the shadow is. I'm just trying to hit stuff in different ways. Yeah, it's pretty easy to identify a shadow below the skirts, maybe on the side of the character or under her jaw or whatever, but really the stuff doesn't make sense. I felt better about Venus. I fixed up her arm, got her hand in there, pulled her out a little bit more. Yeah, that's pretty much the same. And ultimately, I liked these colors. I like this feel here. You can see Sailor Moon just with these greens, and these were her base colors. But I think to harmonize it, I settled on a common yellow shadow for all of them. So you got yellow shadows here under her and on Mars, yellow shadows on Mercury, Jupiter. Those are just kind of the base shadows, but then I kept taking it farther. I threw in some magenta on top, like some splashy purpley magenta, and I think that's still a rich kind of color in there. It's not that dingy purple here that I was originally working with. I think there's some high contrast shapes in there, and then I pushed it even more. So a good thing I like to do is like throw down an adjustment layer that's just black and white contrast on all this color, and that's what I did here. And you can see in here, it just feels like a big blob of kind of the same gray values, right? We got some nice dark grays and blacks in her skirt with the cat down here, tuxedo mask in the background, hair. There's some little punches of black here and there, and obviously some lighter colors, the skin and the moon and all this white down here. But all of this in here, there's not a lot of separation to me. I felt like there's a lot of gray, other than maybe her face that kind of pops out. So still trying to solve that. And this was before I threw down the purple. And then like I can see there's like one stroke of black here and one stroke of black here behind her neck, like kind of like this T shape, maybe another one here. And that's what I needed. I think that's what I needed to separate her a little bit. Still have a lot of color, still have a lot of contrast. I accept a little noise. I think there's some stuff that's maybe a little hard to read, but I like that this feels like this kaleidoscope of colors right in here. I'm speaking all this out loud because this is what I'm trying to feel, and this is kind of what I'm trying to capture, in the process. Yeah, to help see this, I use that black and white layer. I think this is a pretty good trick that a lot of artists use, no matter what your style is, when you're trying to find values and trying to see if there's enough contrast in your piece. Yeah, the icing on the cake was a couple choice black strokes directly behind Sailor Moon's head and neck. Yeah, that's what I was talking about back there, just to help push that pop. It doesn't make sense. These aren't shadows or anything. It's just like it needs a little color right there just to break it up. And I love that stuff. I love how these purpley strokes, fall onto their legs a little bit and kind of fall into some of these areas and a little bit on her face, a little bit over here. It's this look that I like that I think is unique to this piece, even though there is a lot of stuff that a lot of practices that I've done over and over again. And by now I finished season 1 and Artemis was revealed, so I had to throw the white cat in there. And I think I got these little sparkles here. I call these like fashion sparkles that just kind of add a little bit. We would do this all the time in the casino industry, these types of sparkles all over everything. We would say to each other, "Oh, you got to hit it with the sparkle stick. Oh, your art's not popping. Hit it with the sparkle stick," and we would just put glitter or sparkles all over everything. And I think that kind of covers it.
That was awesome, Bob. Thank you, man.
Oh yeah, one thing through this whole process, you wouldn't believe this. I forgot her pigtails.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Moon's got these crazy pigtails all the way back to the sketch. I never even had it, man. Never even had him in there. And I think that's a little bit like me saying like, that's such an easy thing. I'll do that sweepy stroke in there later, and I got no problems throwing that in later. But really, there's some caution there because it could affect the composition greatly. Like I really wasn't thinking about it. And fortunately, it was a very vertical piece, and I had the room over here on the sides. But there's a little bit of arrogance there. That was like, yeah, I got that. I'll totally add that layer, no problem. That's going to be a quick brush stroke, and it's going to be fun. But you got to be careful.
That was just like an additive solution and not a subtractive solution.
Yeah. Lucky on there. Lucky there.
Yeah, wishing you continued success, man. You have a good one.
Awesome. You too, Tony. Thanks again.